everyone. Welcome to Realization Hub. My name is Michelle. I'm an intuitive counselor, energy healer, channeler, and astrologer. And today I am going to be offering an energy update for the partial lunar eclipse in Pisces happening on August 27th at 6:18 p.m. Hawaii time. So for some of you, that's actually going to be on Friday, August 28th, depending on your time zone. This lunar eclipse is happening at 4 degrees of Pisces. So if you have any personal placements that are within the first 10 degrees of a mutable sign like Pisces, Sagittarius, Virgo, Gemini, this eclipse is going to have more of a personal impact on you. This partial lunar eclipse is a full moon. As you can see, the full moon in Pisces is opposing the sun in Virgo. So we are in Virgo season. Happy birthday to Virgos. Pisces is the last sign of the zodiac. So often we can be coming into themes around completion, surrender. We can be coming into themes of intuition, our psychic abilities. The moon in Pisces is one of the most psychic energies, in my opinion. And so during this full moon, we could absolutely be tuned into our psychic abilities a lot more clearly. So I would say around August 27th, the days before, the days after, this is a really good time to take your intuition a little bit more seriously. Like, take some time to write down your dreams, take some time to write down any visions or clairvoyant images that you may receive. Take time to write down any downloads, insights, visions, inspiration. These are all forms of intuition that you might be getting. There's a lot about this full moon. I think this energy can be expressed in a lot of different ways, but there's some things that I want to point out about it. One thing I want to point out is this full moon is at 4 degrees. And just about the entire month of July, we were within a basket formation in the sky where we had Pluto at 4 degrees, we had Neptune at 4 degrees, we had Uranus at 4 degrees, and we had transiting Jupiter at 4 degrees as well. And it created that basket configuration, which was interpreted as like a turning point in civilization, major shifts in consciousness happening collectively, as well as probably the rise of a new civilization of some kind. And we're continuing to see themes of that. We're continuing to see those themes of the collective being in a crisis, new technology expanding at warp speed, um, reimagining what life might look like if it wasn't going to be a form of self-sacrifice collectively, and tuning into our wisdom, tuning into our leadership. What have we outgrown with our leadership? What kind of leaders are supporting humanity now? And during that month, you may have had some intensity showing up simply because you were going through a lot of energetic changes. And here we are during the Pisces full moon at 4 degrees. Now, we're no longer in that exact basket configuration, but this is kind of like an echo back to that same degree that we were in July. The number 4 can often bring up like a very foundational energy. It can be like the energy of our foundations. And if you think about the foundations on Earth, like they're literally just not functioning. They're incompetent, they're corrupt, they're falling apart, they're starting to get weird. People aren't respecting the systems anymore. Um, And then when we also look at the number four, someone brought to my attention that four can sometimes represent death. And we definitely, I don't know if you noticed, but I noticed in July there was a lot of public deaths happening, and a lot of people, almost like a death window or death like portal or something opened up in July because a lot of public figures passed in July, but also I noticed a lot of people had people um, kind of suddenly dying and dealing with death. So I think that's interesting, because we are kind of dealing with the crumbling of society, and we're at the same time at a turning point. And then we have the North Node in Aquarius at 29 degrees. First of all, this is a full moon on the North Node, so something new is developing. But this does kind of emphasize more of a completion energy than it does something like new. The completion might be what helps us move on to something new or change something so that we can experience something new, but something has to be completed first. So the 29th degree with the North Node in Aquarius is like a karmic completion point. Something important is being completed right now. And as we release that, as we release what needs to be completed, even if it's just an energetic alchemy that we're releasing, it could also be actual physical things in your life that you're releasing, like locations that you're living in, your home, relationships, your job, your career. There's all kinds of things that we attach to that we must kind of release at some point, especially when we've outgrown it and it's kind of creating a pattern that no longer works for us. And then we have to let it go and open up to kind of a new way of existing, a new way of being, a new way of showing up, a new way of orienting in our lives, a new embodiment in our lives. So when we look at Pisces, Pisces is a water sign, it's a mutable sign, and it is a feminine sign. Pisces is dreamy, spiritual, imaginative, usually has a lot of compassion, empathy, psychic abilities, very receptive to collective energy, very sensitive psychically, can easily be a psychic sponge. And so we have this full moon. It's an eclipse. Something is ending, something is coming to a culmination. You're reaping something that you've been sowing. Maybe there's a celebration or a fruition coming to this time. Maybe there's something that you've been envisioning that's finally happening, or maybe there's something that you've been dreaming about that's starting to come to completion. Or maybe you're letting go of a dream that you're recognizing isn't sustainable or isn't what you want anymore. Maybe you've outgrown an old dream. You're letting that go. These are all just things to think about, kind of ponder, kind of where you're at with your dreams, your visions, what you want to create, your um, your psychic abilities, your sensitivity. What do you need to surrender around this full moon? What do you need to surrender to around this full moon? One of the first things that stands out to me here is that this full moon is in opposition to Mercury. We have Mercury in opposition to this full moon, and Mercury is at home in Virgo. So Mercury is comfortable here. It does very well in Virgo. However, it's so close to the sun. Like we have like this cazimi with the sun before this partial lunar eclipse, which just means that right before this full moon occurs, we have some kind of insight. We have some kind of clarification. We have some kind of reset or download or something comes into our awareness. It allows us to see something very differently. And and then we have this lunar partial eclipse. And it brings up this tension, with Mercury so close to the sun. Mercury is under the rays of the sun, which means that it can bring out more malefic qualities around Mercury. It's not performing as strong as it could, typically in Virgo. And so when we think about some of the more like stressed aspects of Virgo, we're thinking about where our mind is hyperactive and it's thinking about every little detail. It's over processing. It's like the inner processor is burning out, right? We're thinking about a lot of different things, maybe a lot of different perspectives, maybe a lot of different choices. Maybe we're doing a lot of mental labor where we're like planning things and we're just like lacking the mental capacity. We're feeling burnt out mentally. Maybe we're dealing with like an inner critic or being more critical or stressed or like perfectionistic. Or maybe we're being more skeptical and we're not, maybe we're kind of leaning more into our logic than into our intuition. But nonetheless, this full moon brings something to culmination. It's making this Piscean energy very loud, and it's a type of kind of rebalance. So something that is on our minds is going to become more louder. We might have a lot of mental activity around this full moon. It could be a little bit restless or anxious or nervous. You might notice that your nervous system is more activated around this full moon. But collectively speaking, I mean, this could definitely represent something in the news, that becomes very public in the collective. Um, Possibly something in the news that is surprising, shocking, disruptive, or awakening in some way, because we have Mercury in a square with Uranus in Gemini and Sedna in Gemini here. And so Uranus is that planet of chaos, disruption, awakening, change. Um, and so whatever like we're thinking about, whatever message that we get, whatever news that we see, whatever we're thinking and processing, there's some level of disruption to that. And, it could be anything from breaking a thinking pattern to a disruption that helps awaken us to a new perspective, a new way of seeing something, or a disruption that changes our communication, a disruption that causes us to feel stretched between logic and intuition and choices and what choice to make. And do we make the logical, practical choice or do we make the intuitive choice? What perspective is true? What perspective is liberating? Um, Chances are you'll be able to see many different perspectives during this full moon. You might be exposed to many different perspectives, many different personalities, many different ways people communicate, think, process, relate to each other. And there might be some kind of insight that you get about that. There might be some kind of information that you get around this time that leads to a form of change, whether that change is happening within you or externally in your life. Mercury is going to be in a sextile to Ceres. Ceres will be in Cancer. Mercury will also be in a trine to Chiron, Chiron in Taurus. This could, honestly, this public information that's coming um, could be related to food. I mean, Taurus is definitely related to food. Um, Virgo can be related to farmers and farmlands and farm animals and things like that. Um, Virgo also brings up topics around nutrition and wellness and food, and so I'm almost wondering if there's information that's becoming more revealed to us about food, about what sustains us, what isn't sustainable. I know recently in the news, I've been seeing people bringing up weather systems, like a super El Nino, and people talking about the lack of fertilizer and the lack of oil and how that could affect our crops and our food production and have food shortages. And, um, again, it's just like another layer to an apocalyptic experience that we're kind of all in, like a collective crisis that we're all in. And it's not that we can't have food, it's that like we're dealing with systems that are completely corrupt and incompetent right now. Um, and it's become more political and like, about power and wealth than it is about sustainability. So none of this is sustainable right now. And we all know that. So this does bring about like the opportunity to tune into your intuition and ask yourself what is sustainable for me in the long term? Like what is when it comes to my dream, when it comes to my plans, when it comes to my choices, what is sustainable? What is not sustainable? What do I need to change? Um, And this can be very healing for us. It could be something related to our financial security. It could be something related to our self-worth, our values, our grounding, like how we ground and anchor into things in our lives. Um, this is something that is good to ask yourself, like maybe you have a vision, maybe you have a dream, maybe you've been approaching it with a lot of mental thinking, maybe it's a lot of thinking and processing, paying attention to a lot of details, having to organize and put into order a lot of details, having to create a system, having to make decisions, like logical, practical decisions. And then we've got this full moon in Pisces, this eclipse in Pisces, where it's like, is this sustainable? Is what is not sustainable? Release this, end this so that it can be sustainable. Let this go so that it can be more sustainable, so that you can take more sustainable action. One thing I'm noticing about this lunar eclipse is that we have this T-square with Uranus in Gemini, T-squaring the sun, the moon. So this eclipse is about change. Again, this could be internal change, like maybe we are done with a pattern. Maybe it's a communication pattern that we're done with. Maybe it's like a thinking pattern that we're done with, or an emotional pattern that we're done with. Maybe it's something that has been a form of self-sabotage, or the way we're approaching our goals or our dreams that is a little bit more reckless or chaotic, or coming from an outdated belief system, but either way, like there's something that is ready to release. around this full moon, and we're being asked to make a change, an internal change, an external change. But that change looks like it can be, I mean, for some people, this this lunar eclipse could be disruptive, it could be like awakening, disruptive, chaotic. But here's the thing about Uranus and kind of like its higher mind, it's the planet of the higher mind. Like oftentimes when you experience Uranus transits, like things do get disrupted, things do change. And while you're going through it, it might be like challenging to suddenly have things change or be disrupted or go through a period of chaos. But then things, like patterns that need to be broken are broken. Like it's kind of a liberation, whatever's changing, it's like your soul's liberation, right? And so things then start to realign and reorganize. So this lunar eclipse here, something is being disrupted, like a pattern, a thinking pattern, a communication pattern, um, a perspective, a trauma pattern, like it could be something like that, that you begin to kind of awaken to something disrupts that pattern, and then you change something, starts to lead to a new change. This could be something that you're attached to because we have Sedna here in conjunction with Uranus. Could be like a thinking pattern, a trauma loop, a communication pattern, a relational pattern, a more intellectual pattern. Um, it could be something that you've been attached to that's kind of getting in the way of your overall evolution, your overall transformation, your overall kind of like you coming into your power, and you might feel like you're forced to let it go or pushed to let it go, or something occurs to let it go, and it might be, the letting go of that, the surrender of that might be challenging, but it's ultimately like a change that is liberating. And so I'm curious if you've been thinking about a choice leading up to this full moon. I'm curious if you've been doing a lot of planning and a lot of logistics, a lot of putting things into order. Um, I'm wondering if you're feeling like you're lacking the mental capacity. Your mind is being stretched. Maybe there's an issue with anxiousness, nervousness, restlessness. Your mind, your nervous system being on overdrive. Like I wonder if something's coming to a culmination. Now, when I did start to tune into this full moon, I'll say that there was definitely like an awakening energy to it, like a kundalini kind of release. And so it is possible that this full moon is more about our trauma and our healing, and maybe something, that a pattern that we're breaking. Um, and how our kundalini energy can kind of be activated around this time and start to help us like kind of purge out the energetic pattern, like clear the trauma from our body, ultimately change the pattern. But it could be, yeah, I mean, mentally, this feels like it could be like stretching us around this time. We could be mentally stretched, like our minds are tired or our minds are overwhelmed or, anxious about something. Collectively, I mean, I could definitely see this being like shocking news, something, like when there's shocking news that comes out, like all of a sudden you get the collective reaction and you've got everyone's different perspectives on it. You got people hating on it, people encouraging it, people protesting it, people supporting it. You got like totally contradicting perspectives, different truths, relatives, truths, depending on who you're talking to, their background, their communication skills, their relational skills, their level of education. Like you get a lot of different opinions, a lot of different perspectives, and I do think it's a time where we have to be discerning, we have to really be discerning and whatever chaos or disruption or shock happens at this time, we ultimately have to kind of get grounded and bring order um, to something, purify something, heal something, in order to move forward. And that's because there's a yod. There is a yod, a finger of God pointing here to the sun in in Virgo here during this eclipse. So a yod is kind of this is like a collective healing, I think. Absolutely. We have, I mean, this is part of transformation that's occurring energetically, consciously through the collective. I mean, this is probably a shift in consciousness now that I look at it. Um, I know that that's something that I see a lot, but that's because we're going through pretty exponential shifts in consciousness on the planet right now. So it's just going to keep happening. Like consciousness is going to keep expanding. The planet's going to keep awakening more and more. There's going to be more collapse and disruptions and more new developments that are occurring in civilization. So we will be having more awakening and shifts in consciousness, and I think this full moon on one level could definitely be a shift in consciousness for a big group of people, if not a lot of people. So those of us that are going through spiritual awakening and beyond that, this might be more of an energetic release, a shift in consciousness, a Kundalini purge, an energetic purification that's occurring, a trauma pattern that is releasing or something like that. This yacht is formed here by Pluto and Neptune, and it's pointing at the sun in Virgo. Pluto represents our soul's evolution. Neptune represents kind of like the etheric realms and our creativity and our imagination and what we're envisioning and our ideals. And so this is kind of where like our evolution meets our vision, and we must refine, discern, embody, and purify, our identity. All right, so this could be a surrender, a release of an identity, um, a shift around our identity, a change within our identity. Um, and that allows us to move forward in like a role where we fit into collaborations and groups and humanity and communities, where that fits into what we need to innovate. The sun is in a trine to Chiron. So, the yod is pointing at the sun. The sun is, going through a positive, beneficial, harmonious kind of healing. And we're definitely breaking through like a pattern. We're breaking through a routine, a pattern, a daily pattern, something that happens often, something that might be, in the way of who we are becoming or the dream that we are creating. We also have this trine from Lilith and Sagittarius, and that's more about like our wild feminine power. Are we like something I'm sensing about this eclipse is about our feminine energy. We've got this trine here with Lilith and with, the Sun and Mercury and a sextile to the North Node, a square to Neptune. We're dissolving something. We're dissolving self-sabotaging philosophy and truths and experiences and reckless ways that we approach our higher goals. This trine here, though, yeah, with Eris, Vesta, Chiron, this is healing. This is about our sacred purpose. This is awakening the feminine. It's about our coming back into our wild power, what's more natural. Like we've been domesticated, the feminine has been domesticated, and this is kind of like the feminine energy coming into more sovereignty and more confidence and more boldness, you know, new developments with women, with feminine energy, especially in the collective. Going back to the full moon in Pisces, it's in a trine with Mars and Ceres. And so this can bring about a lot of confidence. It can bring about motivation, enthusiasm, a feeling like we can move through challenges and obstacles, take action, assert ourselves, take action on something that's more sustainable. When I look at the kind of like this overall picture, I see change. I see letting go of something that's kind of in the way of our overall transformation. I see that surrender and that release, and I see something being disrupted, like a pattern. I see us balancing out the difference between our intuition and our logic, what we're discerning and what we're kind of flowing into, like what we're planning, what we're flowing into, what is coming into order, what is dissolving. Um, I tell you what, if something is being released from your life during this time, it could almost feel like it just dissolves. Here's the thing with this full moon is that a pattern gets disrupted, something gets disrupted, something changes, something has to pivot, we have to reorient ourselves in a certain way. And we might have to bring something back into order that gets disrupted. And we have to follow like our gut instincts, our psychic instincts, our intuitive instincts, our emotional safety and security, and kind of take action that is more sustainable. The ruler of Pisces is Jupiter. Jupiter is making a beautiful trine to Saturn here. And essentially, Saturn is the planet of restrictions and delays and hard work. And then Jupiter is that planet of abundance and expansion and growth and travel and philosophy and like our moral ethics and things like that, our wisdom. And it's kind of that energy of like expansion, but doing that in a gradual way, or expanding, but also needing to restrict, you know, cutting the excess out of our life. Maybe there's something that was too much, like too much of this is happening, too much of that is happening, and we're having to kind of prune things down, we're having to prune things out. We're having to kind of drop the dead weight, release baggage, because it's too much. So we might be wanting to expand and be enthusiastic about that expansion, but also needing to do that responsibly, or needing to cut back, or needing to like do that gradually, or like at a slower pace. This eclipse is also ruled by Neptune. Neptune's in that kind of minor triangle with Uranus and Pluto. It's in a square to Lilith. It's in conjunction to Mercury. It's in a square to Mars. All right, so we do need to take intuitive action, but the action that we're taking might not be very clear. It might be confused. There might be a clash between what we want, what we desire, versus what feels safe and secure and sustainable. We might not be clear about something. but yet we must follow some form of gut instinct or some kind of emotional or intuitive instinct around what sustains us. So I think we're gonna feel a few things in this full moon. I think we're gonna feel the sensitivity, the psychic sensitivity. I also think we're gonna feel a lot of mental activity. And I think that mental activity will be a little bit like stretched, something that's a little bit burnt out. We might be feeling tired around this full moon or kind of woozy or just um, anxious, nervous, overthinking, a hyperactive mind, or maybe your mind's not functioning very well at all because you're going through like a trauma release or an energetic release. And, just your mind is very active because when you are purging energy and releasing energy, and like, your mind might get a little bit more noisy or chattery as you're releasing some old energy. And, if there is like a disruption, if there is chaos, if there is a choice to be made, what is supporting us the most within that disruption, within that change, within that choice that you're making is your emotional instincts, what feels safe and secure, what is more sustainable, your gut instincts, your psychic instincts. Like, when making a choice between logic and intuition, yes, this would be one of those moments of being both discerning, but also taking intuitive action. I think we could see themes around this lunar eclipse related to women and related to mothers, simply because we have Ceres in a trine with this full moon. So I think there could be things in the news about women and mothers. Um, when I look at Venus, it's squaring Juno, and it's also in opposition with Eris and Vesta and um, Pallas Athena. So there's definitely like an awakening going on with the feminine energy. There's definitely continued strategy and awakening and kind of aligning with more of a divine purpose, a higher purpose, a purpose around sexual healing, around partnerships and marriage, the old system, the old ways clashing with what women, with what society, with what the feminine energy needs now, needing to kind of shed light on something that awakens, you know, um, what is maybe not working in the system, what is not fair in the system, what is out of balance in the system, ultimately creating some change, some exposure around uh, our feminine energy, our relationships, old old hierarchies and relationships, old levels of authority and management of our relationships, like all of that might be kind of challenged, but also like a form of initiation and awakening going on. Somewhere where we're lacking information, we get more information or something possibly coming out in the news that is awakening or shocking. It feels like there could be reorientations to different perspectives, and there can be major shakeups. And since I do see things kind of related to nature, earth, food, you know, maybe there's, more conversations about earthquakes or our foundations or our foundations where they need to change, where they need to integrate more technology. We do have the North Node going into Aquarius. Maybe we see some kind of disruption involving technology, or maybe you need to integrate technology into your life in some way. Maybe you definitely have to do things different. Um, there's like I'm kind of going back and forth between the collective and you because I think it's a full moon in Pisces. So the collective energy is going to be more pronounced, and then we've got all the different perspectives happening in the collective. And then we have you, what you're thinking and processing, and how your perspective and your communication is changing, and, the action you are taking based on your discernment and your intuition and, you know, your decisions and what's sustainable. I see this as a liberating full moon, kind of like that image of like a bird that's been in a cage and maybe there's like a secret that keeps you like a secret or something hidden within your heart that you've been holding, that you haven't been revealing, that you haven't been saying, that you haven't been sharing, and maybe something that's been like hidden in your heart or stuck or suppressed in your heart. Maybe it like releases and you have more of like a heart opening. I definitely think this is a full moon where if there are any veils that you have outgrown that are distorting your perception, that are causing you to be more delusional or projecting something or not seeing something clearly, that those veils could start to dissipate and release and dissolve. Maybe there's some veils around being seen, not being seen, the way other people see you, given that we now have Jupiter, in Leo, and we have the South Node in Leo, and this, eclipse is ruled by Jupiter in Leo. And I'm wondering if maybe there are some veils that are dissolving how we're seen, how we express, how, what people see about us. Is there an old veil from like childhood where people constantly see you as this? Do people constantly see you as this incompetent person or this stupid person or this person they don't take seriously or this person that is like a certain way, something that's not not up to date, not real. It's like, are people still seeing something like a veil from the past? Are you hiding? Is there something hiding? Like something can dissolve around these veils that might be fogging up the way you're able to see others or be seen. All right, let's go ahead and pull some cards for this full moon. Starting with the Light Seers deck. This is a tarot deck. All right, first card we get is the Six of Swords. And as you can see, there's this woman in a boat, and she is, leaving behind something in the past that looks maybe dark or difficult or stormy, and she's headed towards like a new experience. And this is a card about transition. It is about moving away from a difficult energy, like whether that's trauma or a problem or something that was difficult. We're moving away from that. We're transitioning. We're on a spiritual journey towards something new. And this transition is a little bit bumpy. It's a little bit um, turbulent. I'm really picking up a beautiful energy about this. It's really pretty, but it's kind of like, let's say you were on a canoe. We'll just work with this image here. Let's say you're on this canoe, you left, you know, the piece of land that you were on, and you've been on the ocean for days or weeks or months. Maybe you've been in a very long transition. This is kind of like the ending of a transition, is kind of what I'm picking up about it. It's like you've been in a long transition, and this is kind of the ending of that transition. It's like that moment where you see new land and you're like, oh, there's even like a little rainbow on that piece of land. And it's just like this moment of like, oh my gosh. Like this transition is coming to an ending. It's not coming to an ending immediately, but like we're about to turn a corner. We're about to make a change. Like there's about to be new experiences. We're not just going to have this experience of this like never-ending transition. We're going to start to have new experiences. Like what? You're almost there. Like you're almost on that new piece of land. And then when you arrive on that new piece of land, it's like a new life or a new experience, and like you can leave that behind. Like the transition is ending and you're going to be more grounded into something new, right? And so I see that about this card. It's overall kind of showing me that it's been a little bit rough. It's been a bit of a rough transition. You've had to leave something behind that was kind of tough or difficult or dark, or heavy. And that transition might have felt turbulent or like a spiritual journey. And maybe you've had to be very self-reliant through that journey. And this is kind of like that moment of seeing the light at the end of the tunnel or seeing new land after months, out on the ocean or, just kind of that feeling of like, oh, like what I wanted, what I was dreaming, what I was hoping for, like it's possible or it's real or it's something is kind of materializing. It's coming to fruition. Next card I'm pulling is from the Wisdom of the Oracle deck. Second card I pulled was Chop Wood, number 42. It is a image of a broom and a doorway. Generally, this card is a symbol of being grounded in daily life, which is very Virgo. We're going to have Mercury in Virgo, the sun in Virgo. We're going to have a yod pointing at Virgo. And sometimes the most, it reminds me of that quote, like chop wood, carry water before enlightenment, chop wood, carry water after enlightenment. Sometimes the most enlightenment that we get, sometimes some of the most sacred things we do is in our everyday mundane experiences of cleaning and organizing and doing chores and getting things and putting things into order. And so what I'm sensing about this is like we're definitely going through some kind of cleaning. And there's before the full moon and after the full moon and bringing more presence to our daily lives, bringing more wisdom into our daily lives, making our routines more sacred, embodying, like you might actually benefit from cleaning. Like if your mind is kind of going crazy and your nervous system is kind of restless, like this could be a great time to just clean, like clean your closet, clean the house, like do some chores, get some errands, done. Um, See the sacredness in the mundane, be more grounded in reality, be more humbled by by insights you can get when you're just doing mundane things. Like you can have these big spiritual experiences and you can have these um, mystical experiences, but you can also like have an incredible download while you're doing the dishes, So this is kind of like that card coming out. The last card I'm pulling is from the Starseed Oracle deck. I got three cards that came out. So one is Jump In, and it looks like an eye. Also like someone jumping into like a pool, like diving into a pool. And it says Andromedan energy adventures say yes to change. So yeah, this full moon could bring like change. And, you know, this is a card that says just dive into the change. It's probably a new potential. Like dive in, new potential. Uranus can definitely be like the planet of the higher mind. It can definitely bring about kind of like timeline shifts, quantum leaping, like new potentials. It works outside the mind, And so this is this is like diving into a new potential, diving into a new timeline. taking the adventure, doing something new, changing something. Then we also have a card called Star Bathing. It says light body, crystal grid, transmission, and activation. Star bathing. This is making me think of rest and kind of allowing this receiving kind of energy, like rest and receiving, and like when you're in that state of being and resting, kind of being like in a void, like suddenly, like that's where we can get our ideas and that's where we can get our downloads and that's where we can kind of tap into a new potential or a new insight or like a new way or a change that we need. And so I'm seeing that in your sleep, when you're resting, that can actually be very productive. The other one we have is called Inner Earth, and it says, You'll survive this, new solutions and beginnings. Inner Earth, new solutions, new beginnings, you'll survive this. So, yeah, this kind of reminds me of whatever transition we're in. It's kind of like that feeling of like, oh, we've hit new land and we're getting that message of survival that we're getting through whatever this is and that it's leading us to new beginnings, something that looks much beautiful, much more grounded and beautiful and sacred. So overall, this is a time to lean into change, lean into shifts, lean into pivots. You might experience a spiritual timeline shift, some kind of new potential arising that you dive into, that you jump into, that you pivot into. You could be releasing old trauma patterns from the past that allow you to kind of ground into your life now, who you're becoming now. This could be a very healing, purifying an eclipse where you're breaking a trauma pattern or releasing some energetically. This is a time to follow your intuition, tap into your instincts, and take action towards things that are more sustainable and emotionally safe for you, toward your dreams. And it's also to stay grounded, stay humble. Like if you are feeling anxiousness, nervousness, feeling weird, feeling restless, feeling anxiety, like you might actually just want to move your body, like clean something, organize something, plan something, just, kind of do something practical. And I do think that it will be important to rest or sleep well, try to rest or sleep well during the eclipse to kind of tap into some of those potentials, those intuitive insights, and to recognize overall that this transition is kind of coming to completion and you're headed towards new beginnings and new solutions, and that you're just kind of like riding out the ending of this transition. All right, everyone. It was so good to see you. So good to tune into this moon with you. There's definitely a lot going on, and that makes sense because it is a full moon in Pisces, which is a mutable sign. So I do think like there could just be a lot going on. There could be a lot going on and collectively as well. So make sure you stay grounded through this. Do whatever you need to do to stay grounded, but also rest. If you're interested in getting an intuitive reading, an energy healing, or booking an astrology reading, you can find more information in my description box below. And if you're listening to this on YouTube, please hit the subscribe button, like the video, comment, let me know how you're doing, let me know what's coming up for you, let me know what might be shifting in your life. You might not see it coming. Um, and then if you're listening to this on Spotify, please subscribe to the podcast and give it a good rating. Write me a message. I love hearing from you, and I'm sending you all psychic hugs, and I hope you take care. If you ever want support through all the energetic shifts and changes that are happening in your personal transformation or in just this entire global transformation that we're doing together, I offer group sessions on a monthly basis that are based and aligned on the energies that are occurring right now for all of us. I offer a group energy healing each month, a guided meditation, as well as a channeled message. Okay, it was so good to see you. Take care. Bye.